Hey there guys, Noah here, and welcome back to another Vanguard discussion video. Today I'm going to be here giving you guys the deck breakdowns for TCG-Con Premium for 2022, and oh my god, this tournament was, despite the low attendance, was actually pretty intense. We had roughly 13 people, if I remember correctly. Some dropped midway through the rounds, just because of, their records and whatnot. But, there was still money to be made, money to be had, and it was just honestly a really great time. I had fun hanging out with all my friends there, and it was just a blast. The con in itself was actually really, amazing. I'll just go on record and saying, I know for the Overdress tournament, they had roughly 23 people, but we only had roughly 13 for this event, for the premium event. So whether or not you personally would consider this a major event, that's up to you. But I made some pretty decent money from the tournament alone. So I count that as a win for me personally. Now I'm going to be going over the list for the top 4 because the cut was to top 4 since we only had a certain amount of people. And I will provide the deck logs in the description below, so if you want to go and check it out, as we're going through all of this, feel free to do so. But I'm going to quickly just go through my own list, and then I'm going to talk about all the other lists that did top, because I do find some of the deck design choices very interesting. So let's get into it. So starting off with my list in particular, it is definitely, I've made quite a few changes since the last deck profile I made not that long ago, and this list was very inspired by a good buddy of mine, Andrew's list, so thank you, who also topped. He came first. I'll go over his list later, but the major difference with this deck in comparison to the last one is that we added the Rollock. Now, Rollock, when I saw it being used in Nightmare Doll, it was very interesting because it wasn't a workroid, but it was an amazing defensive tool, and that was something that Luar desperately needed. So I decided, you know what, let me tech this in and see how this works out. And considering how well I did in the tournament, I like to think it actually did. It also helps with the fact that it is, if you choose to guard with it early on, it does help with the ritual costs. And it's honestly a really solid pick. Of course, we also we got the Dawnput Dragon and the Blaster Dark for the constant Grade 2 ride. Just in case we don't happen to open with a Grade 2, but we get the main and another Grade 1. We can at least search out the Blaster Dark from the Dawnput, making the ride consistency at least a little bit better. And then we're also running the 1-of Connell. This does come up quite a bit. It actually came up against my 4th round match. I'll go over how my rounds actually went later, but this card really came in clutch on a bunch of scenarios, because Connell basically sits there and says any single target effect that targets my board, let's say for example, let's say if Photon's placed and it chooses something to lock, instead of locking that unit that it wants to choose, it redirects it to Connell. And, there's a variety of different, ways this could be used. It's also nice because it's a 5k, so we could search it off in the main. And it's honestly just amazing, honestly. And then the rest of the deck is pretty much self-explanatory from, my past list. I got a Dagda to 3 mostly because I just didn't have the space to add a 4th. But even if I did, I don't think I would want to add a 4th. Having Dagda on those Professional push turns are nice, but it wasn't really a necessity in most scenarios for me throughout this tournament. It came up a lot, but it was, it never came up when I didn't want to see it. And, as long as that's the case, it's all good. And then G-Zone wise, it's pretty much the exact same, minus the fact that I took out the Seabreeze and added the Akuma back, as well as running the Chainraker. Now, Chainraker may be a very strange choice to a lot of you. So why would you run this? Simply put, in the advent that your opponent's at 5 and they have a low hand count, this card just auto wins, because you're more than likely going to have a board full of Grade 1s, at least in the back row. So his Generation Break 3 effect is going to go off, basically making it so that way, whenever they guard from hand, they have to use 3 or more. and this is really crucial in the late game. This actually did come up in my top 4 match, and honestly, it's just, you know, I run it as a one-up attack. You know, you could like easily change around the list however you see fit, but I honestly think that in certain matchups, in certain scenarios, it does come up, and I think that, you know, whether or not people start adapting it, not for the G-flip skill, but just for the GB3 skill, you know, that's really up for debate. But regardless, I love this deck. I'm going to be putting it down just temporarily so I can focus on other things like the Raging Fall and the Chaos list that I'm working on. So yeah, honestly, I love this deck. I'll go into more like my rounds in a moment, but like, yeah, it's honestly just, I can't be more happier with this list, honestly. Up next, we have Overlord. Now, Overlord is pretty self-explanatory for many of you who've ever actually played it before. Basically, you want to ride the V-Series Cross to get the marker, and then ride it into the Legion to push for those really insane push turns. This is a pretty standardized list, and like to what we've seen before. You run the strike-in so that way, when you go into the Cross, regardless of which one, it's backed up by a crit. Igni Road for great searching, Conroe for more searching, the Grade 3 Searcher for more searching, like, and we're running obviously 12 crit with this. I do question why he's not running more of the effect triggers, because I feel like that it's like, especially the Advent, that you can't, like, especially since he's not running the Cyclone, I don't see why you would run the vanilla. Maybe he just didn't have, but regardless, you know, can't complain. And then the G-Zone is pretty self-explanatory too. 2 Domji'd, you know, because it's honestly a really decent stride, especially in the, if you want to push for a little more damage, like, it actually does come up. You have the Progenitor and the Zeroth Dragons, very vital cards. I really doubt that he used the Novelle L'Express or the other one of in the deck, because mostly, typically, you're always just gonna do, you know, your Grade 3 plays and just, you know, Legion and do all this other crazy stuff. So enough to the point where the G-Zone is just extra at that point. And yeah, like, he's running a lot of G-Guards, like, just to make it so that way, if any certain situation comes up, he can actually do it. He's got the 1 as a 2 of that gets power for, you know, each open rear. That does happen quite a bit. He has the Defeat Flare that recycles his Overlords. He has like quite a lot of toolboxing with this G-Zone, and I can see why it actually did top. Alright, up next we got Tachi's. So by this list alone, I think a lot of people would be like, wait, why is he not just running Anger Blader? Mostly because he just got sick and tired of it. I know this guy personally, and he was just trying to find a list that actually works best without running Anger Blader, but can still like do all the crazy stuff that you would expect from Tachi's. And I do think this list actually does work. He's been testing this list for quite a while, if I remember correctly, and yeah, he's just running the Spinal Driver for the Excel marker generation. You've got all the other pieces, you know, from the main deck, you know, just being able to, you know, put equip gauges to gain power effects. You know, you have the Sweeper that gets like big off of those, you know, equip gauges, and just, you know, the main deck is pretty self-explanatory. And then G-Zone is pretty much by the numbers as well. You've got 3 of the Gluttony Nibros, which is the restanding Vanguard. You also have the other Premium Collection Stride that basically acts as a Anger Blader on, you know, as a Grade 4 unit. And you also got the Gaia Devastation specifically for the Link Joker matchup, which I do agree with, because Tachi's like, it kind of falls to LJ if they don't get the proper setup. But at least with this, it's like, okay, cool, I can get around that. And then obviously you have the Progenitor and the Zeroth Dragons, the G-Guards, which get pretty big on their own too, depending. And honestly, you know, this list, considering he's not running Anger Blader, he actually did a very solid job, like, making an alternative way to make Tachi's work. Alright, finally, this is Great Nature. This came in first. Holy fucking shit. To put it lightly, Great Nature is scary. And if you play Great Nature, this is your best friend. And I will vouch when I say this version of the list is probably the most scariest it will ever be. You've got 2 restanders between the Grade 3 Big Belly and the Crayon Tiger, which can power up your rear guards, can give you extra restanding, and you really combo off the Rhino from that, because it just Sentinel, it doesn't Sentinel block, but it blocks grade 0s, and then you also got the Monoculus, which combos with it. Really good on a Zoa turn, by the way. I don't know if you've ever noticed. You've got a lot of draw power from, other cards, such as the Gray Belly. You got countercharging off of the Pangolin. Yeah, this deck list is very tech heavy, and it does its job extremely well. Like, god damn, I like it. It's a bitch because this deck draws like a crap ton, like from the Excel marker generation to the count, like all the retire effects that go off. Like, it's actually crazy, and really the G zone makes it 10 times worse. You have the Magnan armor. I apologize if I'm butchering the name, but he either gives power to rear guards or he increases his drive. And either way, it's a lose-lose, especially when you could combo that with the Rhino, which blocks grade 0s. Oh man. And that's not even talking about the worst part of his fucking deck, arguably and debatably. Like, you could sit there and say the Barlar is probably the greatest push turn he can do, but I would argue the greatest push turn is actually going to come up during the opponent's turn, thanks to the Megaloloma. I know I butchered the name again, but like, whatever. Basically, this is the Progenitor Dragon that if you lose, you don't die, pretty much. You just, you survive another turn. What's crazy about this, and even the judge that was there, Gustavo, his face was just like, wait, what? When he found out that you could just purposely deck out thanks to a couple of your G guards. I forget which one it is, but like, you'll basically draw the remaining of your deck during your opponent's turn, and then because of Megaloloma's effect, it'll end the turn right there, the moment that he gets pushed to 6, or, he decks out thanks to the G-Guard skill. Like, it's crazy because if you swing rear and he does that, you don't get the drive checks from Van. It's like so many people make that comment mistake, but I've seen it enough times to a point where it's just like, God, that combo is disgusting. Like, it honestly is. I'm just like, and that's on top of having a really crazy kill turn with the Zoa and, the Rhino and the Monoculus Tiger combo. This deck is just nasty. It draws a bunch. It gains so many, like, it just draws a crap ton, really. And, just between the strides, the main deck, and you have so much utility in this deck. It's actually crazy. And some may argue that you could run Isabel instead of Big Belly, but I would argue Big Belly is not only faster, but it's more consistent than the Isabel. And that's just simply because, you have all the synergy from all the other cards with it. Like, it's just, you got good retires, you got good countercharging, you've got good draw power. Need I say more of it? Like, it's, this deck, it's no wonder why it came first. Alright, so, now that we've gone over the deck list, which topped, I kind of want to just go over what happened on my end personally. I really just, I can't believe I actually did well in this tournament. Considering I basically just took Andrew's list and just tweaked it a bit. Like, it's honestly crazy. So, round 1, I went against Narukami, probably easily my worst matchup, period, outside of Great Nature. And it was against specifically Eradicators. Game 1 I took. Game 2, it was just, okay, it was just kind of feels bad because he was just binding like crazy off the stun burst and then just being able to push with the Descendant, and pressuring me, it was just not fun. And then Game 3, unfortunately, went into sudden death, which is going to be a reoccurring trend. I'm convinced at this point, anytime I play this deck, sudden death rules is whoever takes first damage auto loses. and I one past it at one point, and he got the trigger, and he killed me. Like, either way, I feel like I was going to lose that matchup, even if it didn't go into sudden death, even if it didn't go into time in general. Mostly because it's just, again, a really hard matchup. And even despite the fact I won the first game, it was just rough overall. Game 2, or rather set 2, I went up against Battle Sisters. Battle Sisters, I was at least somewhat prepared for because I watched somebody's video on it. And, man, Battle Sisters was crazy. She went off with the Momo turn, you know, getting 3 Amaterasus to basically, like, get 30k and 3 crit on her Vanguard. And I'm just like, wait, what? Luckily, I had PGs in hand, but, like, it was just rough, honestly. And then, really, what really sucked, and I feel bad about it, but, you know, you have to be mindful of it, too, was Game 3, we went into time. And I had just finished doing a huge Morfessa turn, and she was about to finish me with the Ishikishima. But because she had more damage and the judge called time and that was it, even after the 0, 1, 2, 3, she lost because she had more damage than me. Even despite the fact that she was going to kill me that turn. I feel bad, but at the same time, you have to be kind of more or less aware of these things, and it doesn't seem like she was really bothered by it all that much. Maybe a little bit, but, you know, it is what it is at that point. Round 3, it was against Harry. I felt really bad because game 1, it was just, okay, I'm going to go into Morfessa and just go Unga Bunga. But then game 2, I purposely grade 2 gamed. She was already at 4, and I had the Twin Drive off Blaster Dark. She guards 2 to pass with the 2 V triggers in specific. I hit crit, followed by heal. And I just, you know, at that point, really not a whole lot you could have done differently. Maybe if she had a heal guard in hand, just -2 crit to Van. But, like, I think if she did have it, she would have just done it. Really tragic, but it is what it is at the end of the day. And then match 4 was against Granblue. And Granblue was rough, to say the very least. Granblue, I got the first win just simply because I was able to keep Morfessa, you know, to be a really strong win condition for me. I also had Kano in the back row on purpose, though, in case he tried to G-guard and retire anything in my front row from the Skeleton Cannoneer. I could just redirect it toward the Kano. And then game 2, it was just, honest feels bad. Like, he was able to push enough to a point where it just, I decided, you know what, screw it, we're just better off, you know, just trying to push a little bit. I really did the best I could given the situation, because essentially what I did was grade 2 game him enough to a point where he had to basically give up, you know, the grade 2 game. And I think I was very close to killing him, but I think he just healed out. And he was, from there, able to kill me. So we had to go into sudden death. And basically, because I was more defensively capable and being able to, like just the fact that I had 3 Morian Spears on board at one point, it was more than enough to take him out. Yeah, it was just rough on his end because Granblue kind of doesn't have a good early game like that. I think in some ways it was just a bad matchup because a lot of his options that he had toward me, I was able to shut down. Like at one point he had the Ghosty Perfect Guard on his rear guard, and because he had Beatrix as his Vanguard, so he could have intercepted with it. I went into a Stride, activated the Stride skill, called a Ritual card, and then retired it. So, and then that was on top of having Connell, so it's just like, at that point, I feel like for Granblue, it's kind of a bad matchup. But, yeah, that's what led me into my top 4 match against Andrew and his freaking Great Nature deck. Like, you know, Neko already faced him before, not that long ago, about several months ago, back at Golden Phoenix. But this was just rough for me because I was already aware of the crazy shenanigans from that past tournament and just knowing that he's been updating the list ever since. So game 1, right? I try going for a Mephisto turn, and I don't kill him. And then he goes into Megaloma. And then I'm just like, you know what? Fuck it. Game 2, because I can't beat that. And the judge was just like, again, he was sitting there, right? And he was like, wait, why did you just scoop like that? That makes no sense. And then after the set, we explained it to him. And he was just like, wait, oh shit. So game 2 happens, right? And pretty much I come to the realization I cannot play the grade 2 game. And I have to essentially kill him before he goes to his huge push turn, right? So I sit there and I weigh my options and I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna keep like pushing damage. So I flood the board as early as I can and just swing, pushing him to 5. And then the entire game, I'm without any counterblast, mind you. So first stride I go DRAGNOA.SHADOW. That's not enough to kill. You know, he goes for a stride turn. I somehow survive. I decide he's got a limited hand, right? In comparison to what he could be doing. Screw it. I'm just going to go into Chainbreaker and force him to guard a crap ton. And even if I hit 2 stand triggers, he would have had enough to guard. So from there, he was able to push and just kill me. But honestly, at that point, I really couldn't complain because I did the best that I could. I feel like Chainbreaker really did help in that situation because he was actually sitting there thinking like, oh crap, I have to use 3 or more from hand. That's kind of rough. If he hits stands, that's extra rough. So I feel like in that sense, like I feel like the Chainbreaker helped a bit, but like it was still like Great Nature is still arguably one of the worst matchups for Shadow Paladin, period. Because any hand that they lose, they can easily build that up and then some. Like even if you go full Mephisto turn and everything, most Great Nature lists can typically survive that, and then they could just kill you, and it just feels bad. So, you know, at the end of the day, I can't complain. Like if I'm gonna lose, I might as well lose to a friend at that point, and you know, I'd rather lose to a bad matchup that I can at least work around somewhat, and just like have fun like messing around with, versus like dealing with something like Narukami that's just frustrating. You can argue that Great Nature's arguably worse in some aspects, but I'm like, you know, at least Great Nature's fun, so I can't take that away from him. Like I will say this: I don't like facing Eradicators. I don't like facing Narukami in general with this deck. So anytime I just cringe anytime I have to face Narukami. This is what I pretty much did round 1. You know, and it's just, it was what it was. Like, I had a fun time, honestly. It was just, the entire tournament was just great. But yeah, I think I'm going to wrap things up for today's video. I definitely want to give a big shout out to TCG-Con for sponsoring the event, for hosting it. Definitely want to thank Gustavo, our judge, for the event. You know, he really did try, especially in the earlier rounds for me personally, like, you know, just helping me like comprehend what was going on in certain situations. You know, because I did have like, I understood a lot of what was going on, but there was like a few plays I was kind of like bewildered with. And you know, even despite the fact he was basically like solo running the entire event, like I don't know what happened with the overdress event, but I imagine if it was just him, I mean, at that point you're doing a really good job at that point, man. And yeah, I'm going to wrap things up here. Thank you guys for checking out the video, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.